Microsoft's getting ready to talk about the next generation of Windows, but what does that even mean? Back from vacation, decompressing and getting back into the video sort of mantra, if you will. While I was away and trying not to pay attention to the internet, despite my best efforts, Microsoft made some pretty significant announcements relating to Windows. Now, Windows is probably one of the company's most profitable products in its entire history. Their cloud services may eventually surpass that, but Windows has been the bedrock of Microsoft. It's done everything from Xbox all the way up through the cloud services. And so when Microsoft starts talking about the next generation of Windows, it's a pretty big deal. Now, we are leaning into what is going to be happening on June 24th, and it's more than likely going to be called Windows 11, which we will get into that in a minute. But we need to take a step back and talk about what Microsoft has already officially talked about relating to Windows to help set the stage for what is coming on June 24th. Now, if you went back to Build, Satya Nadella, the CEO, actually kind of showed off the next generation Windows intentionally or unintentionally with this screenshot here. And you can see it doesn't look all that different, but you can definitely see some notable exceptions, including Edge looks a little bit different, especially the rounded corners on the windowing there. And then also the close, minimize, and X out options are all a little bit different than what we see today. Just a little bit of polish that we don't currently have in Windows 10 at this moment. But we know that there's some big changes coming, and we know that, at least it appears that what Microsoft is going to announce isn't like a fundamental overhaul of the OS from underneath. We know that because Microsoft has already canceled, or they confirmed my scoop, that Windows 10X is not coming and has effectively been canceled, or at least put on the back burner for a significant length of time. So it is proper Windows that Microsoft is going to announce, and they are going to announce some pretty big updates. The question will be, how big are the updates and how deep do they go? I suspect this is going to be much more of a surface level polish, kind of finishing out the UI, or hopefully, honestly, probably defining a new UI. And Microsoft is we're going to start to see a new direction for the OS, as Panos Panay has now had time to put his stamp on it, and we will see what his team has been able to come up with Microsoft's desktop operating system. It has been a long time coming. Remember, Windows 10 really didn't have a true effective leadership for a couple years, and then Panos got assigned or took on the role, whatever you want to call it, and now Windows is hopefully making a comeback in some capacity. And so there's a couple things to understand. This is going to be, what we know so far, are pretty significant design changes, but I don't think it's a fundamental overhaul. If we take a look at what Windows 10X would have looked like, now don't read too much into this screenshot. This is more of the start menu experience that would have been in Windows 10X that is now not going to arrive. But you can imagine this is in a smaller and more collapsed version, and also more specifically, notice that it is in the center of the screen there. The start button is centered in the taskbar, and it's also blue, and I believe that icon might be going away in favor of a more traditional Windows logo. That is actually a Windows 8 legacy flag that was, or icon, whatever you want to call it, that debuted way back then, and it's time for an update. Windows 8 obviously did not go over all that well, but this style of start experience, I believe, is going to be coming in the next Sun Valley update, where it's in the center. Now, the other thing to keep in mind about the Sun Valley update is that it's going to be utilizing, at least from what I understand so far, the experience packs. Remember, Microsoft announced these things, and we were kind of like, well, why would you have these things in experience packs? That kind of reminds us of like what they did back in the XP days. Well, right now you install basically a version of Windows 10, you download this experience pack, and it unlocks all of these features and functionality. And I believe that's how Microsoft might be using this for the next update that is coming down the pipeline. This has a couple benefits. One, if an enterprise wants to uninstall it, it seems like that might be possible, although we aren't completely sure yet. Also, I can tell you that if you don't like the centered start screen button and features and functionality, at least as of right now, you can move them back to where they are today to give you that just traditional Windows feeling, which might be, again, more popular in the enterprise world, where they just want to keep the cheese right where every user has known and left it. Now, on to the naming. Why would Microsoft go with Windows 11? More specifically, because at one point Microsoft said, hey, Windows 10 is the last version of Windows. Now, a sizable chunk of the people that actually made those decisions are no longer at Microsoft. There are still people around, but I think Microsoft just kind of ran Windows 10 through the gamut, and it needs a revitalization, honestly. I don't think Windows 10 is a bad OS. I really don't. It is fine, and that is probably a good thing that they're using Windows 10 as the foundation to build Windows 11 11. They're not trying to introduce anything major, at least per our understanding that it's not going to be a significant overhaul. But the curious thing here is that next generation. Are they talking about next generation technology or more next generation user experience? I suspect it's going to be more on the latter, that it's going to be the user experience. But there's also some other tangible benefits from calling things Windows 11. For example, if you're an OEM, like let's just make one up, say HP, and you have a new laptop that you put on the shelves at Best Buy, and it says it has Windows 11. When Joe User comes in and says, hey, my device has Windows 10. That thing has Windows 11. That must be better than what I have. So I should go buy that. I know that's a really simple experience or like an analogy, but keep in mind that many, many years ago, there was a business case scenario where Burger King launched a third pounder hamburger and they thought it would sell better than McDonald's quarter pounder, but basically people thought the quarter pounder was bigger because 4 is bigger than 3, and as you know today, the third pounder does not exist at the Wapa location. So just keep all that in mind, that while it is superficial that it's just called Windows 11, it is actually a proven marketing techniques, and Microsoft loves a marketing moment, and so they are not going to overlook this given the opportunity. Now, there are some general just concerns that I have about this. Microsoft has a really poor legacy of rolling out, well, I shouldn't say poor legacy, but the last UI update that they tried to roll out, Fluent, has gone exceptionally poorly. Actually, as of, I think it was last month, the Azure logo inside of Microsoft finally was updated to support Fluent, right as they're on the cusp of announcing a new design language in Windows, and they barely got Fluent out the door. There's also, Windows 10 itself is not a good example of what Fluent design is. Go look at the File Explorer, go look at many different things, like the context menus are not consistent across the UI. That is what I'm going to be looking for here as we approach June 24th, which is when Microsoft is going to hold their event. Like, can they get the UI consistency across all of Windows 10? And it is incredibly complex. You've got serious legacy components in there to bring all this to market, and it's a tough challenge. The question is, were they able to do it? How complete and consistent is it? And what is Microsoft going to do to truly prove that this is quote unquote next generation of Windows? It's a big deal for a lot of Windows fans who have been waiting for some sort of something inside the world to kind of light a fire under Windows, because it's been a long slog of we thought it was 10x, then Microsoft completely just moved away from that. So we will have to wait and see what Microsoft does here. There's a couple other things that kind of point to it being named Windows 11, by the way. If you look at the initial announcement, there's actually a window. They actually removed, it's a light shining through a window, which we've seen this image before, but it looks like they actually removed the crossbar from the window from the shadow, so it looks like it's an 11, if you will. There's also other things. The event is actually happening at 11 a.m. So Microsoft is pretty clearly signaling that this is going to be a Windows 11 branding, which honestly, I think I'm okay with. Windows itself, just Windows and version number would make sense, but Microsoft has already proven that that probably doesn't work. And we know that from the Surface brand. We had the Surface, what was it? We had the Surface 2, 3, 4, and then they tried to do it, I believe, with the Surface 5, and then it was back to 6 and 7. And so Microsoft also tried to do it without the numbering to match similar things that Apple do, but Apple did. But it doesn't really work. And the thing is the guy that is running Surface, Panos, knows that because he was part of the team that made it just the Surface Pro and not the Surface Pro 5. And so calling it just Windows will not work in the way that Microsoft would hope. So a lot to digest, and I'm really just kind of working through this myself now that I'm back looking at all the data that Microsoft has sent out and all of the tea leaves, if you will, that are exposed to the internet about the direction that Microsoft is heading. Now, as with all major fall updates, I would expect that the Sun Valley update would arrive sometime in October, probably like middle to late October would be my initial expectation right now. Obviously, all those things can change depending on how Microsoft feels about it, but that's typically when they do that. It also aligns to the holiday shopping season, right? You get it out in October, which means then you can run ads through October and in November, and then try to sell a whole bunch of laptops ahead of the holiday seasons, which makes all your partners happy, which gives Microsoft, again, a marketing moment. While Windows 10 does have a lot of rich history and it has very strong brand recognition, Microsoft does have to move on eventually at some point, and I think this is the chance that Microsoft is willing, or the risk that Microsoft is willing to take at this time, because the company realizes that, hey, Windows isn't going away. When Microsoft kind of made Windows a rudderless ship, if you will, because they didn't have a true single focus, single point of leadership. I think Microsoft thought that Windows was just going to kind of ride off into the sunset, and that was the end of it, and they'll just continue to cash in, and that was the end of the journey. But then 2020 happened, and all of a sudden PC sales are going crazy, and Microsoft realized that, hey, Windows does have a very long future ahead, and that's when Panos took on the leadership role within Windows, and now we are here on the cusp of launching the next generation of Windows. So that is just a bunch of information that is floating around right now as we lead up to June 24th, probably one of the most exciting times in the Windows world in a long time. Microsoft hasn't had a proper big Windows event in many years. While they did have some for like the creators update, and those were okay, I think this is going to be hopefully elevate what we've seen previously. The question now is how deep do they go, and how long is the next generation of Windows going to ride out? Because Microsoft is betting for a longer future, and let's hope that their bets are correct. So as always, folks, keep it subscribed here, because the only BS on this channel is me.